my name is Jennifer Christensen, and I am an upper school English teacher here at Christ Presbyterian Academy, and I'm just really excited to be with you guys this morning just for a few moments to unpack a passage of Scripture that I know you've read recently, Genesis 37, which is where we meet Joseph for the first time and see the relationship played out in his family dynamic. And then later in Genesis 45, the first 15 verses, we get to see where Joseph's reunited with his brothers, his identity's revealed as they come and ask for help in the midst of a severe famine. It's a really interesting look at the life of a man who in so many ways, as we dig into chapter 37 particularly, mirrors the life of Christ. He becomes a prefiguring, so to speak, a foreshadowing of who Christ will be. In fact, in many ways, he is representative of a Christ type, but in two ways particularly. And it's evident as you look at Genesis 37 that Joseph's life was a life of suffering. And he was born to suffer. He was born to experience the sting of rejection. He was born for betrayal. And he knew exactly what that felt like in a very personal way because he was betrayed by those closest to him. Now, I'm going to tell you about betrayal. I've experienced it. We've all experienced it. It's part of the human condition. It's part of being here and navigating this life journey. But I experienced betrayal recently in a very powerful way. In March of 2020, when COVID was becoming evident and the shutdown looked imminent, my son decided to turn 14 and to go through puberty. In fact, I don't know why this particular moment was chosen for my family, but it was as if the universe decided that at the precise moment that he would shoot up 4 inches and his voice would drop 4 octaves, that it would take a giant key and throw us in the house and lock us in there with nowhere to go. Ladies and gentlemen, that is betrayal. And truthfully, although I have never experienced it to the level of Joseph, I do know that it's something we are intimately connected with as we navigate this life journey. The other area where we see Joseph such a foreshadowing of the Christ to come is that he wasn't just born to suffer and to face rejection and betrayal, but he was also born to be exalted. He was born to unify. In fact, he was born to help perpetuate the covenant that God had made with his family. In addition, and maybe even most significantly for us, he was born to redeem the irredeemable. And truthfully, he sealed that redemption through the power of forgiveness, something we learn intimately through the life of Christ as well. Now, here's what I want to do with you guys. I want to take you to chapter 37, and I just want to pull out or tease out 5 different parallels that I see in that chapter between the life of Joseph and the life of Jesus. So I'm going to start first with the relationship between Joseph and his father Jacob. It's so clear in the very first few verses of 37 that Joseph, who was the first son of Rachel, who happened to be the second wife of Jacob, but the preferred wife, he was beloved of Jacob. In fact, that relationship with Rachel even accentuated the love that he had for his son Joseph, and his brothers knew it. And they hated him for it. And truthfully, if we look into Matthew 3:17, we see God speak as Jesus is being baptized by John the Baptist, speak from the heavens. And he says, "This is my beloved son, of whom I'm well pleased." And so at the very beginning of this chapter, we see the relationship between father and son established. And that relationship is a relationship of affection. And secondly, the hatred. The hatred that Joseph receives from his brother is so punctuated in Genesis 37, and it just continues to grow. But in 37:4, we see it so intense that they couldn't even speak peacefully to him, the scripture says. And in John 1:11, we're told that Jesus came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. We see Jesus walk out this tension all through the Gospels as he navigates against these people, groups who are so close to him, who are in adversarial positions to his word and his deed. And number 3, Joseph has a few dreams. They're dreams of his own superiority. In fact, in Genesis 37, 7 through 12, we see him tell these dreams. And in each one of them, they place him in a position of authority over his family. And let me tell you something, they were not well received. In fact, Just like Joseph, Jesus predicts his own preeminence. In Matthew 26:64, he says, "You'll see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Both men comfortable with this future authority that they will assume in time and space. Number 4, in Genesis 37:24, we see Joseph cast into the pit in the ultimate betrayal. While in Matthew 27:59-60, we see the crucified Christ who's been cast into the tomb. And then number 5, maybe most strikingly because of our connection to these stories, in the ultimate betrayal moment in Genesis 37:38, Joseph is sold into slavery, literally for the price of a servant. 20 shekels we're told in the scripture. And in Matthew 26:15, Jesus is famously sold by his disciple Judas for 30 pieces of silver. You see, ladies and gentlemen, when we look into chapter 37 and we see these parallels building, all this does for us in our spiritual journeys is helps us anticipate what is to come. And not only to anticipate what is to come through Christ, but to anticipate that these two individuals were not just only born to suffer, but they were born to do something bigger, more perpetuating, more eternal in nature. And that's where we turn to Genesis 45. The first 15 verses, I'm going to be honest, there are two things that happen in these first 15 verses that are just astounding to me. The first one is the amount of emotion that Joseph displays when he is reunited with his brothers in this scene, and they don't yet know his identity, but he recognizes who they are, and they have come to him in a position of need. Over and over again, it talks in 45 and even beyond at the end of Genesis about Joseph just openly weeping. He can't even control himself. It's so loud that the entire household of Pharaoh hears him. It's much like what it sounded like in my house when my son went through puberty and the universe locked us in together, right? This emotion is just absolutely out of bounds, and yet it is exactly reminiscent of the emotion that Jesus experiences in the garden before he is exalted on the cross, right? And secondly, in these first 15 verses, I am just absolutely undone at how Joseph acknowledges over and over again, 4 times in fact, that it has been God's plan all along to put him in this place of exaltation, that he has risen to this level in Pharaoh's household because God did it, not man. In fact, he uses the same language. He says, it was God who sent me. It was God who made me Lord of Egypt, right? This dream, all these dreams he had, they were always God's dreams. And he relates that to his family so they know that it wasn't what they did. It was what God was always doing. In fact, isn't that just like God, right? It's that grand reversal that's always happening. It's man's intent to perpetuate evil against God's plan to undo evil, right? And usher in this redemption through the sacrifice of his son. We see Jesus articulate this same understanding, this capitulation to God's will in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says it in the scripture. He says, "Yet not what I will, but what you will." This submission, even in the Son of God, to the ultimate authority of the Father's plan to restore humanity and creation, right, is foreshadowed by the forgiveness that Joseph extends to his own brothers. I love chapter 45, verse 15. It is absolutely stunning. Joseph kisses his brothers and he weeps on them. And listen to this, guys. Listen to this. He says, after that, his brothers talked with him. These very same people who in an earlier stage of their relationship, they cannot even speak peacefully to him. They find in the shadow of his forgiveness, their mouths unstopped, right? The relationship is restored. Their anger and their resentment is forgiven, and they're restored to a right relationship with Joseph. And you know what? It's the same way. The sacrifice of Jesus restores humanity, me and you, into a right relationship with God. And we don't have to fear, and there is no condemnation. You see, that's the good news. The good news is that the forgiveness that Christ's sacrifice provides us has redeemed the irredeemable, just like Joseph. And these parallels between the life of Joseph and Jesus, they function as this beautiful refrain that kind of points us to this melody, this larger melody of a symphony that God is not just created, but He's also conducting, even now, where you sit as you read these verses again. And over again, the story of Joseph tells us of what we can anticipate in the life of Christ and the life that we'll live eternally as we're restored to God the Father. See, we can rest in that today. So I want you to be encouraged.